Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. On today's episode, we return to the Rebellion era, shortly before the events of The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire uncovers an ancient superweapon, one that could allow its owner the ability to control travel through the galaxy, and it's up to Han, Leia, and Chewie to stop them, with the help of a rebel spy. It's Honor Among Thieves by James S. A. Corey. And look who's returning to talk about the book with me. It's my buddy Matt. How have you been, Matt?
I'm doing great, my buddy Aaron. Thanks for allowing me back into the lounge with you.
Oh, always welcome. Listener, if you tuned into the podcast last year, you'll remember that Matt was one of the guests who joined me to cover the new Jedi Order series. Now, Matt, you're back to talk about one of your favorite Star Wars subjects, the relationship between Han and Leia, specifically in this era. What is it about their dynamic that you love so much?
Yeah, man. We've talked about the courtship of Princess Leia before. What a book. What a book. But I do love Han and Leia's relationship. We're going to do like a 3-hour podcast today, right? So I can just go for a little bit. That's fine.
I might have to go to bed at some point, but
No, real quick. I love their honesty, Aaron. Neither Han nor Leia expect each other to play nice with each other all the time, which means they get to be forthright and candid, even hitting to hurt a little bit. But they know that the other's not going to take it too personally. I love that about them. I love their silly passion for each other and the way it makes them do strange things. Like, Leia is as cool as a cucumber. She negotiates galaxy-impacting deals. But then, what does she do when she notices Han pulling away at Hoth? He's about to leave. She gets frustrated. She gets flustered. And to make him jealous, to try to get him to stay, she kisses their best friend. Like, that's just hilarious to me that Han does that to Leia. It works too. And Han's no better. A guy who prides himself in always being like able to handle things so well. No one gets under his skin more than Leia. That whole, what do you think about her? I'm trying not to, kid. I just love Han and Leia's relationship. And I love to see how it evolves through the EU as well. Whether it's Han, they kind of put each other's needs ahead of their own in the expanded universe at different times, right? Early on, when Leia's starting the new government in the early years of the New Republic, Han takes on much of the home duties. He's taking care of the kids when they're babies. He's kind of the stay-at-home dad. Leia plays the role in establishing the government. But then later, like in the stuff that we just finished covering, the new Jedi Order series, it's Leia that takes that oversized co-pilot's chair in the Millennium Falcon. A chair that's too big to fit her initially, but it's interesting that symbolically Han has it replaced with a chair that's more her size. She even supports Han later in the next Galactic Civil War. We suppose we won't get into spoilers with that because you haven't covered the Legacy of the Force series yet. But overall, their story is one that overcomes all odds, and I think in a big part because they allow each other to be exactly who they are. So that was way long-winded, but it's why I love them.
oh, that's why you're here.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, I'm really looking forward to talk about this book with you today, and of course, Han and Leia's relationship at this time in the story. But before we get to that, how about we take a couple listener questions? The first comes from Calican in Germany. Calican says, I was wondering what your favorite Star Wars comic is. Thanks for making such a great podcast. Well, thank you for the email, Calican, and thank you very much for the kind words. Matt, I'll let you answer this one first. Do you have a favorite Star Wars comic?
I thought about this one. I haven't read a ton of the comics. I will say that probably my favorite, though, is the Shadows of the Empire adaptation. For the most part, it's got my favorite cover artist that did the covers for the adaptation, Hugh Fleming. I think I talked about him in another episode of your cast. A great artist who's done some of the novel covers as well as comic book covers, but cool adaptation and a lot easier to get through than the book, which is not one of my favorite Star Wars books.
No, it's not.
What about you?
Well, for me, I would say in Legends, there is a comic in the Old Republic series called Redemption. I'm not a big Old Republic fan. Some of those comics aren't really for me, but I do think Redemption is a really good comic. It's about a Jedi who has lost the ability to touch the Force, and he is training a little girl to basically become a Jedi, and he's doing it to redeem himself because of the bad things that he has done previously in the Sith War. So I would say
Ulick Qel-Droma?
Yes, correct. Ulick Qel-Droma.
Yeah, okay.
And he's training Nomi Sunrider's daughter.
Oh.
So, yeah, I like that comic. I think
Nomi Sunrider rules.
that comic is by far my favorite in the Old Republic. And then I would just say in canon, I just want to throw this in here. In canon, I do like some of the Dr. Aphra comics. Some of them go a little too zany for me, but Aphra is a zany character. But I think some of the others are really fun.
I haven't gotten into Aphra at all. I'll have to check that one out.
I read the first run. I have not read the second run yet. I know that one is pretty popular with people. But some of the Aphra comics I find just zany.
Just fun.
Just fun adventures.
That's what you need from these stories sometimes. Just something fun. So It's good to hear. All right. Well, today's second email also comes from Germany, from listener Robin, who says, I have a friend who doesn't like Star Wars, doesn't want to watch it, and says it's all about selling toys and destroying the environment for profit. It's a fair point because every new Star Wars media will create more and more plastic junk. What's your opinion on the matter? Was the battery behind Star Wars always the toys?
Thank you very much for the email, Robin. I don't believe the goal of Star Wars was to sell toys. Initially, I do know that part of the reason Lucas negotiated the licensing for the Kenner toys coming out of the first film is so that he could basically be completely in control of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He did not want to have to answer to a studio for those two movies. So, pretty good businessman. He negotiated the licensing and made a bunch of money, obviously, off of A New Hope and a bunch of money off of all those old Kenner toys. Again, it's a saga for children and children of all ages. And what are you going to sell to children? You're going to sell toys. Now, if you look at it, since the end of the prequel era, toys have not sold as well. They did not sell as well during the sequel era. They do not sell as well now. Now the people that are buying the toys are really the collectors, and they're buying the collector's edition of all of the toys. I mean, myself, one of the very few things that I collect besides the books are very specific Lego sets. I don't get nearly all of them. I maybe have 1%, but there's a very specific set of Lego that I like to collect. So you're not going to get around it. If it's popular, you're going to want to sell to kids. But do I agree that the driving force of Star Wars was to sell toys? No, I don't agree with that.
I agree with you. I also agree big time that Star Wars is for the kids, man, and for the little kids in all of us. And as a guy that sat outside and as a kid, not as a man, played with his Star Wars toys, and now to this day sits outside and plays with his Star Wars toys with his little nephew. My little 4-year-old Star Wars obsessed nephew sits and plays with my big box of Star Wars toys now whenever he comes over. And that's the movies are magic, but stretching your imagination is magic as well. And I love that we have the toys for that, even though as there is, it's a fair point about there being an environmental impact to all of this stuff that we have in the world. Aaron, have you watched the Toys That Made Us documentary series on Netflix?
No.
There's a great one. I think it's season 1, episode 1 is the story of Lucas and Star Wars toys.
Right, so, the old Kenner line.
Yeah. So, Robin, if you haven't checked that out, that might be interesting to you. If you get that one on Netflix in Germany, I hope so. But The Toys That Made Us is the name of the doc series, and I think it's season 1, episode 1 is all about Star Wars.
Thanks again for the emails, Calican and Robin. Listener, if you have a question for the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now, coming up at the end of the show, we've got a listener's unpopular opinion to share. You'll want to stay tuned for that. Now it's time for today's book, Honor Among Thieves by James S. A. Corey. Matt, are you ready to talk about this book?
Locked and loaded, my friend.
Awesome. Listener, grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
The story begins with the Rebel Alliance in hiding. Shortly after the destruction of the Death Star, Princess Leia meets with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, and she has assignments for both. For Luke and Red Squadron, it's off to the Samardi system to analyze its potential for a new Rebel base. There are reports of a spatial anomaly in the system that throws off sensors, and Han has heard tales of ships going missing in the Samardi system. But if Red Squadron can find a way to navigate it safely, Leia thinks it could be the perfect place for a new Rebel base. Han's assignment is even more risky, to extract a Rebel spy from the planet Sioran, right in the middle of Imperial space. Reports from the spy, named Scarlet Hark, went quiet 7 months ago, but she recently sent a secret retrieval code requesting a pickup. Leia emphasizes that she's not ordering Han and Chewie to go, but she's asking them. The Alliance is asking them. Han forces the princess to say please, and then agrees to take the mission.
Han and Chewie sneak onto Sioran and make their way to the contact point in a public park. There, Han runs into an old smuggling buddy, Bosun Ray, who says Scarlet sent him to bring Han and Chewie to her. But when they get into Bosun's speeder, they notice 3 others waiting for them, all armed. It turns out Bosun works for Jabba the Hutt, and the Mirialan plans to collect the bounty on Han. Their captivity is short-lived, however. As they arrive at the spaceport, Chewie busts out of his handcuffs and surprises the thugs. Han takes advantage of the diversion, grabs a blaster, and shoots at Bosun, taking his hand off. After they tie up the bounty hunters, Han and Chewie make their escape and resume their search for Scarlet, with Bosun promising to have his revenge.
Han tracks Scarlet down at her safe house apartment. The spy admits that she called for a pickup because, yes, she does need to leave, but she needs help with something first. Over the past year, she embedded herself in the household service of an astrocartographer named Ezio Galatian, who works directly for Emperor Palpatine. Galatian discovered something important for the Emperor, and Scarlet was inches away from stealing his report when it was stolen by somebody else first. The Imperials investigated the theft for months. Scarlet doesn't know if they recovered the original report, but she says the investigation's findings are stored at the planet's Imperial Intelligence Center, close to Scarlet's apartment. Scarlet wants Han to help her steal the information. Han initially refuses, but when Scarlet appeals to his pride and offers to pay him, he agrees to help.
The mission goes as you would expect a mission involving Han Solo to go. He and Scarlet infiltrate the Imperial Intelligence Center, steal the plans, trip every alarm in the building, climb up to the roof, and then jump onto the landing ramp of the Millennium Falcon as Chewie flies by to pick them up. They evade a squad of TIEs and 4 Star Destroyers in orbit around Sioran, plus a last-minute attack by Bosun, the bounty hunter they escaped from earlier. before jumping safely to hyperspace. Easy.
Easy. Safely away from their Imperial pursuers, Scarlet discovers from the investigation report that the information about Galatian's secret mission was stolen by someone named Hunter Moss, and the Empire is willing to kill him before he can sell it, even if it means slagging entire planets. Scarlet plans to get to Maz first, and she knows where he's going, the planet Kyamur, where Leia and the Rebel Alliance are meeting with some potential new allies. Allies with credits. When they land on Kyamur, Han warns Leia that the Empire's coming and they need to leave now. But the princess doesn't share his sense of urgency. She'll put out feelers for Maz, but she's also not leaving until she's finished her meetings, secured a few new allies for the rebellion, and warned those allies that the Empire is on its way.
When Scarlet discovers that Moss is on his way, she sends Han to escort him in. Han takes the hacker straight to Leia and Scarlet so they can purchase Galatian's report. Moss says he doesn't have it, but he knows what was in it. Galatian discovered an extinct race called the Kaibak, who discovered the secret to controlling hyperspace routes, who could travel them, and who could send hyperspace transmissions. With that ability, the Alliance could prevent the Empire from attacking planets. What good would a weapon like the Death Star be if it couldn't fire at anything? But if you don't have the report, what information are you trying to sell? Leia asks. Moss smiles. I've got the map to the Kaibak's planet, he says.
Leia makes him an offer, then a higher offer, then an even higher offer. But Hunter Maz is committed to shopping his information around, to the Hutts, to Black Sun, and to others before agreeing to a deal. Leia reluctantly lets him go, then informs Han and Scarlet that their only option now is to steal the information from Maz. And Han's job in this? Keep the thief alive long enough for them to rob him. But this also goes like you'd expect a plan involving Han Solo to go. Bosun shows up to grab Han, but Han convinces the Mirialan that stealing the map from Maz and gaining control of the superweapon will be worth a whole lot more than the bounty on Han. However, Maz catches our heroes when they break into his hotel room, just as the Empire arrives and starts to bombard the planet.
The group stares at each other while turbo lasers blast the planet. Hunter Moss turns to leave when there's a flash, and the hacker falls on his face, a smoking hole in his back from Bosun's blaster. Leia is incredulous, but there's no time to discuss the situation in committee. The group flees the hotel and sprints toward the spaceport with Bosun and Moss's astromech in tow. They lift off in the Falcon while Leia sounds the evacuation. After some fancy flying by Han, the Falcon jumps to lightspeed and safety. In hyperspace, Leia and Scarlet lay into Bosun. Without Hunter Moss, they'll never find the map to Galatian's discovery. But Bosun laughs. We have the map, he says, pointing at Mawson's astromech.
Scarlet cracks the encryption on the droid and projects the map onto the Falcon's holotable. It points to a planet called Semardi 5 in the colonies region of the Inner Rim. The name sounds familiar to Leia, but she can't quite put her finger on where she's heard it before. But Han knows. The Semardi system is where she just sent Luke and Red Squadron. Frantically, Leia tries to get Luke on the comm, but she can't. There's too much interference. It's no use, Han says. If the Empire has control of the weapon, they'll have the system shut down. Leia looks at him in horror. Luke's trapped in the system, and she's the person who sent him there.
When the Falcon arrives in the system, our heroes spot a Star Destroyer orbiting Semardi 5. While they try to come up with a plan to get past the Imperials, they receive a transmission from one of the planet's moons. It's Luke and Red Squadron. They're hiding in a huge ice cave on the moon's surface. Han puts his smuggling skills to good use and sneaks past the Imperials and finds the rebel pilots. Leia fills Luke and Wedge in on the situation and develops a plan. Red Squadron will create a diversion while the Falcon flies down to the surface of Samarti 5. The plan goes off without a hitch, and while the rebel pilots keep the Imperials busy, Han, Leia, Scarlet, and Bosun land near the ancient temple where Galatian found the superweapon.
The group treks through a maze of tunnels, defeating booby traps and battling stormtroopers. Eventually, they arrive in a room with an ancient power console. Han pulls a lever, and the floor starts to descend deeper and deeper into the planet. They travel down what Bosun estimates about 10 to 12 kilometers when the ancient elevator finally stops. They open a door and can't believe their eyes. The planet's hollow. The core is the superweapon. And standing at a console overlooking the core is Galatian. The astrocartographer is much larger than Han expected, and he refuses when Leia orders him to stop what he's working on. Instead, Galatian releases 3 small flying fighter droids and attacks.
The droids pin Leia and Scarlet down while Galatian fires at Han and Bosun. The Mirialan takes a bolt to the gut and falls. Han lunges for Galatian, but the big man tackles him to the floor. As Galatian stands over him, Han grabs Galatian's ankle. The big man sneers and points his blaster down at Han. Just then, Bosun slams into Galatian, knocking him off balance. He tumbles over the edge of the platform and plunges toward the planet's core. Han rises and blasts the droids harassing Leia and Scarlet. They try to save Bosun, but the wound is too severe. Bosun dies just as a squad of stormtroopers arrive.
Yeah, the Imperials pin Han, Leia, and Scarlet down behind the control console. Han and Leia try to lay cover fire while Scarlet works on figuring out what Galatian was working on. Han says they have to leave, and the only way to do that is to blow the weapon. We can't, Leia says. We need this to defeat Palpatine. But Han says nobody should have it. Reluctantly, Leia agrees, and Han starts the self-destruct sequence. He grabs Leia and Scarlet, and the 3 of them dart back to the elevator room and escape to the surface. Han calls Chewie for a pickup, and the Falcon and Red Squadron jump to hyperspace. The story ends as Samarti 5 collapses in on itself. It's another dead end as the rebellion looks for a place to set up its new base. The next planet on Leia's list to investigate? The ice world of Hoth.
Time to take a break. When we return, Matt and I will talk more about Honor Among Thieves. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But allow me to recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, is the story of Galen Erso, Orson Krennic, and the construction of the first Death Star. It's a story of intrigue, betrayal, and how a friendship can be destroyed. An essential story leading up to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Check out Catalyst, a Rogue One novel by James Luceno. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today Matt and I are talking about Honor Among Thieves by James S. A. Corey, a book set shortly before the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Full disclosure, listener, this book was my Christmas gift to Matt back at the end of our coverage of the new Jedi Order series. So, Matt, what was your favorite part of this story?
Well, first of all, thank you for the very thoughtful gift. You did it for all of us that helped you cover the new Jedi Order series, and you put so much thought into why you gave each of us the book that you did, and I thought that was super cool. So thank you, man. I really appreciate it. My favorite part of the book was I just thought the authors, we'll probably talk about that, the authors just did a great job of writing Han Solo. They nailed all of his personality quirks. They nailed all of the the sarcasm. They nailed all of the vanity. They also nailed a part that is only teased in that first film in A New Hope, which is his reluctance to accept the fact that he's buying into the spirit of the rebellion, right? And you start to see it in The Empire Strikes Back. You really start to see it bubbling to the surface in this book. I thought they did a good job. And his relationship with Chewie in the book is just delightful throughout. They do such a good job of telling you what Chewie is saying by Han's responses to what Chewie, they say Chewie growled a response or something, and then Han says something sarcastic back to him, and that way you know exactly what Chewie said. I thought they did a fantastic job of that. But those are some of the things I love, more than a specific instance, more just the way they wrote those different interactions and character development. What about you, man? Or what do you think about those things?
I think this was very much Han Solo between the time that they rescue Leia on the Death Star, which I love how everyone always says that, and I always say that, but they were just the getaway drivers. Leia rescued them.
She rescued
on
them.
the Death Star.
Into the garbage chute, flyboy.
Yeah, Han and Luke were just their getaway drivers, really. But if you take Han from the moment he meets Leia through the Han of arriving at Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, and I think the authors do a really good job in this book of making the Han of this story that Han Solo. He does seem exactly like I would expect the Han Solo of this time period to be. This is very much a Han Solo story. He interacts more with the spy Scarlet Hark than he does with Leia, and I think some of those interactions are very much like his interactions with Leia, although Scarlet herself is more overtly flirtatious.
Yeah.
But flirtatious in a playful way. Like, you can tell that she isn't actually interested in Han. She's more interested in stroking his ego more than anything else.
To get what she needs, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's almost just as flirtatious with Chewbacca.
Exactly.
Book, which is fun.
Yeah. So their interactions on some level are similar to the interactions between Han and Leia. But the Han and Leia interactions we get in this book, particularly at the end, yes, they're still snarky with each other. They're still short with each other. But there's two conversations that they have. They're brief conversations because of everything that's going on around them. They don't have time to sit there and just talk to each other. But they do get pretty deep in those two conversations. One specifically about who should control that super weapon, and the other one about the role of government and how Han sees government. So for me, the plot points in this book weren't anything really memorable. The memorable parts were the interactions between the characters, between Han and Leia, and between Han and Scarlet Hark.
Well said, man. Yeah, to your point about the plot points, I read this book shortly after you sent it to me for Christmas. I probably read it in January or February. So I almost had to go back and reread the whole thing again just to remind myself of even what happened, because it's so unmemorable. But I did find myself remembering Scarlet very well. Once I got back and went, oh yeah, Hunter Maz, this goofball. It all came back to me real quick then. I wasn't quite as impressed with the character of Scarlet. She's fun. But I do recognize the intricacies between Leia and Scarlet, but I did still feel like the interactions Han had with the two of them were almost too similar. I almost felt that sometimes you could replace Scarlet with Leia in almost any of those situations, and it would be the same type of conversation. So I didn't love that quite as much. At the same time, they did do a nice job of building out this character of Scarlet Heart and how she appealed to Han's vanity and ego on a number of occasions.
She was never as short with Han though as Leia sometimes is. You know, they never really got into any
true.
they never really got into any heated arguments like Han and
bickering.
Leia would.
Yeah.
But Scarlet also only knew Han for what, a handful of days? Maybe if she knew him longer than that, you know, they would have.
Yeah, the bickering would have started.
And if she wasn't just playing him the entire time, because she was. Every time she wanted to do something, let's face it, he was there to pick her up and get her off of Sioran. But she's like, no, I want to do this heist first. And even though he didn't want to do it, she talked him into it. And then she talked him into staying there on Kiamur with Leia instead of getting everyone out before the Empire got there. So
very true.
It didn't matter what Scarlet said to Han. She basically knew how to play him like a fiddle. I mean, she could get him to do whatever she wanted him to do.
That's a really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, man. It runs parallel to Leia convincing Han to go on the mission in the first place to grab her, right? And how they both kind of have to appeal to his pride a little bit, and the money thing is a factor. I think it's interesting that you have these two rebel women who seem to know how to play Han, and he attributes it, I think, a lot of times to those women. But at the same time, you start to see his growing affection and allegiance to the rebellion, and it makes you wonder, is he doing it because these women know how to play him like a fiddle, or is he doing it because he's not even willing to admit it yet, but he's buying into what the rebellion is selling?
Maybe
a bit of both.
Maybe a bit of both. I do think even in A New Hope, the first time we meet Han, between Han, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke Skywalker in the cantina, just in that amount of time, you get the character of Han Solo.
Very true.
He's blustery. He's a little bit of a goofball. He has a high opinion of himself. He says he's really only out for himself, but in the end, you always know that he's going to do the right thing.
Well said. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's Han's character pretty much forever. The only time it's not Han's character is where we see him at the beginning of The Force Awakens, when things had obviously gotten so bad with his family that he had to resort to the life he knew when he was alone with Chewie as a smuggler. But that's the only time Han is a different character.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So even in this book where he may be telling himself that, and he probably is telling himself, that he's not in this for the rebellion, he still can see that the Empire is a bad thing, and this rebellion that Leia is fighting for, at least the idea of it, is the right thing.
Well said. Yeah, he always ends up doing the right thing. And that's fascinating, too, to think about it. One of his main arguments with Scarlet and with Leia throughout the book is that if we are not careful, or if you, Scarlet, and you, Leia, are not careful, this rebellion that you're leading, if it's successful, could one day turn just into another empire again, right? That's one of his main arguments for destroying the superweapon rather than using it. And maybe it's just because my mind is on it. I'm reading the Legacy of the Force series right now, Aaron, which is where that actually happens. Basically, the Galactic Alliance becomes another empire. So he nailed it. But what a mature thought for our favorite egotistical knave.
It is. That was one of the things I was talking about, was that one conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, even in the midst of that conversation, Han has to be Han. And while we didn't go into it in the summary, when he finally convinces Leia that nobody should be in control of something this powerful, and she says, okay, you can go ahead and hit the self-destruct. Now, we didn't say it in the summary, but in the book, Han goes, I did like 3 minutes ago. I just had to convince you. I already did it. I just had to convince you to be on my side.
Well, I'm glad you said that because...
Yeah, the self-destruct started like 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Now, the other conversation that I really liked was when they were in the Falcon flying to, say, Marty 5. And Leia was talking about the ideals of the rebellion. Now, some of Han's responses were just his bluster. But like you said before, we don't know who the leaders of the rebellion were going to be in the next generation.
Yeah.
That's what Han's point was. And when Leia says, is this all just, like I said, all just bluster for you? And Han was basically, like the Who. New boss, same as the old boss. It doesn't matter to me.
Nice pull.
Who, I figure with you on, I'd do
Thanks, buddy.
like one music pull that I could actually do. But yeah, but it doesn't matter to me who's in charge. Who's in charge is going to set rules and laws that me as a smuggler, I'm going to have to break, and you're going to come after me.
Always in motion, the future is. Han recognizes it, but he also recognizes that a lot is the same. Yeah, it's a fascinating look at Han Solo as he's teetering on the edge of being a full-fledged rebel, right? Yeah.
So Hunter Moss, one of the antagonists in this story. I was trying to come up with a comparison for people who had not read the book, because this isn't a book that a lot of people have read, on just how much of a goofy, blabbering, blustery person Hunter Moss is. He kept referring to himself in the third person. Hunter Moss will do this, and Hunter Moss will do this. And the closest I could come was Gaston in Disney's Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast?
From like 1992. That's as close as I could come.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying he looks like him. He doesn't. But
No.
the way he acts is kind of like Gaston. It's not perfect, but that's as close as I could get.
Let's riff on that for a second, because that's actually perfect. Mix Gaston from Beauty and the Beast with his little minion guy. What's the
Shifu? Shifo?
LeFou. Mix, because they say he's like really short and kind of squat. He's got a big belly. He doesn't wear a shirt and his belly's hanging out. Put Gaston's personality in LeFou's body and you have Hunter Moss.
He's not in the book very long.
No.
He was just, man, he's a character we don't normally see in Star Wars.
No, you don't. There's a few of those. This story really didn't have an established villain that they were fighting against. There's the Empire, there's SEO, there's Hunter, there's now I can't remember the guy's name. I could look back at the summary. Bosson, yes, thank you. What do you think of that? We didn't have an established villain. Did it affect the story for you at all?
I think the villain of the story was the oppression of the Empire. That's what it was. It's sort of like if you watch the Andor television show. You know, you had Deirdre, who I guess was nominally the villain, and Cyril, but they were just cogs in the wheel of the Empire. That is what the villain is. It's this oppressive thing. Again, a slightly different type of story than we usually get in Star Wars. I didn't mind that there was no big bad in this story.
Agree with you. It didn't bother me one bit because the main entertainment of the story for me was Han. and his relationships with Chewie, with Scarlet, with Hunter, with Bossin, with Leia, even though we didn't get as much. That was what really was satisfying for me, 100%.
So, did anything in the book not work for you?
I didn't love Hunter Maz was so goofy. He was annoying. I think the biggest thing that didn't work for me was what I already said, the Han and Leia interactions, or the Han and Scarlet interactions, feeling too much to me like Han and Leia. They almost felt interchangeable at times, even though there was some key differences. The plot really didn't impress me that much. Oh boy, another super weapon. Blah, 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 blah.
I think that was the one thing in the book that didn't work for me, was the super weapon again. Mm-hmm. Because if you look in the timeline where we're at, we just recently blew up the first Death Star. The Empire is currently building the second Death Star, and now we've discovered, it's like the Empire Strikes Back did not have a super weapon in it. It's almost like the authors were like, well, if the first movie had a super weapon and the third movie had a super weapon, this one's close to Empire Strikes Back. Let's put one there. But honestly, like you said, the plot of this book is not the important part of the book.
No.
This is one of the few Legends stories, because Legends wasn't very good with this, but this is one of the few Legends stories that's mostly just a character book. That's all it is.
Yeah,
it's
true.
A Han Solo character book.
Yeah. That's very true. And the book is action-packed. It moves at a very quick pace. There's never any downtime. There's a couple pages where they have conversations, but usually it's while they're breaking stuff out of the Imperial Center or something like that.
It's funny. Center. There's some humor in it.
It's got great humor. Han is on point. Scarlet is on point. Chewie, even though you don't understand what he's saying, is on point humor-wise. It moves fast. It moves kind of like an Indiana Jones movie, from action beat to action beat to action beat. And you just have fun with the characters. Like, I don't watch Indiana Jones for the plot. I watch Indiana Jones to watch Indiana Jones do cool things and get the girl.
And because it's fun.
And it's fun. And this book felt like that. Star Wars at its core is fun. And we've read some very heavy Star Wars books. I'm thinking Star by Star and the New Jedi Order, things like that. It was kind of nice to sit down with a book that's just fun. And that doesn't discount some of the things it does really well. It's not fun for fun's sake. It does do some things very well. But at its core, it's a fun, kind of lighthearted Star Wars adventure. And I liked it because of that.
You mentioned it's fast like an Indiana Jones movie. Mm-hmm. There were a handful of veiled Indiana Jones references. There's...
Unveil them for us, Aaron.
So there's a MacGuffin that's a map to a secret world. Galatian,
just trekking through the jungle.
Yeah. Galatian, except for his size, because they talk about how big he is. Galatian reminds you a little of Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark, in my opinion.
That's true.
There's another book, and it's the one that I'll be doing next episode, that has a much more overt Indiana Jones reference. But
ooh. Are you doing Scoundrels next?
Me and Scott are doing Scoundrels next.
I loved Scoundrels. I can't wait. So, and I love Scott. And I love you. So this is going to be great. I can't wait for that episode.
Your three favorite things are going to be on one episode.
Aaron, Scott, Scoundrels. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so like I said, this book didn't have nearly as overt references.
Sure.
But I did see a couple things in there. When they go from the hidden place that they are at the beginning, and I can't remember the name of that place, but then Han goes to Sioran, and then Sioran to Kiamur, and then Kiamur to the Samardi system. I just pictured the map on Indiana Jones where, the red line.
Oh, yeah, the red line.
Yeah. That's exactly what I pictured.
That's awesome. Now I'm going to too. Dun, 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 dun. It's almost like Star Wars fans argue with indie fans, like, what's the better role for Han Solo? Or we get offended when we read some interview where Harrison Ford intimates that he liked playing the character of,
he doesn't intimate it. He outright says it.
Yeah. Indiana Jones, he liked playing Indy more than Han, and we get offended by that and stuff. And it's like, just lean into it. Yeah. Just lean into it, you know?
The man's a professional actor. I don't care if he wasn't the biggest Han Solo fan. He
still did a great job with
enjoyed his role as Han Solo.
And if Star Wars can bring the Indy into the Han Solo, all the better. Let's do it.
So, as we wrap up our discussion here, this was the last novel published in the Legends timeline. It was part of the proposed Rebellion and Empire, the other way around, Empire and Rebellion trilogy, with Razor's Edge, which was a Leia book, Honor Among Thieves, which was the Han book, and then the third one was Heir to the Jedi. Now, that book, they decided to just leave it the way it is and make it canon. So it was basically the first canon novel. I think most people that have read all three books think that's probably the least good.
Weakest of the three.
Yeah, the weakest of the three books. But what did you think? I know you're slowly getting all of the Legends readings in that you didn't get back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
What did you think reading the final published book, not the final book in the timeline, but the final published book in Legends?
A part of me did read it with a bit of melancholy thinking about that. At the same time, it was like what you said, that this was more of a character piece. I kind of went, they got it. It took them a minute, but they got it. They nailed it. I love character-driven storytelling. If you've listened to my podcast at all, that's the stuff that gets me. I screw a car chase in a film. I could care less about the car chase. Give me a great character, and they could just be sitting around talking the whole time, and I'll love it. So I did have that feeling of they got it. They got Han Solo, and I thought they went out well in that way. Mm-hmm.
Listener, as we wrap this up, just one little bit of trivia. Matt and I have referenced the authors of this story. If you pick up the book, it says it's written by James S.A. Corey. Well, James S.A. Corey is a pen name. It's the pen name of two authors, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, who write together at times under that pen name.
Where do you think they got James S.A. Corey out of those two names?
I don't know. If you go on their website, which I did, there's also another pen name that they sometimes write under. And I didn't write that down, but they sometimes write under two different pen names. I'm wondering if maybe one pen name, one of the authors does more with that book, and if they use the other pen name, then the other author does more.
Gotcha.
With that one. I don't know. That's just me completely speculating.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, it's almost time to go. But first, I've received another unpopular Star Wars opinion. This one comes from Ross. Would you read Ross's email, please?
Yes, here it is. My unpopular opinion is that continuity and canon don't matter. These stories start with a long time ago, so it doesn't matter if some stories conflict with others. Our own history is filled with unverifiable information, so we as fans should accept that all Star Wars stories are really just legends.
Thank you very much for the email, Ross. That's an excellent way to look at things. Thank you for sharing that very healthy opinion with us. I've said it occasionally as well. I don't know if I've said it here on the podcast, but in general, I don't get too bogged down with what is canon and what isn't. You know, what exactly happened here or what didn't happen here. Like Ross said, these stories in this galaxy, in the galaxy far, far away, happened so long ago. people tell those stories in different ways. Now, that's not to say that I enjoy every way that the stories either interact or occasionally contradict each other. But in general, it doesn't bother me that much. I just say, well, either that worked for me, or if it doesn't work for me, I'll just say, I like the way it happened this other way. And that's the way I'll think of it.
That's what I have said myself, Aaron. I like that. I like that we think the same way. It's like, I remember when Disney established that this was going to be their new canon, right? There's going to be canon and Legends. And I just simply said, well, Legends is canon to me because it always has been. Like, that's what I started with. Disney can say whatever it wants, but in my mind, Legends is canon. And whatever, that's fine. And I can read canon books and enjoy them. I can read Legends books and enjoy them. And if they miss a reference here or say the term football there in another story, like, I don't care. Like, that's fine because it's Star Wars and I'm getting lost in the galaxy far, far away. And the way people tell the stories is great to me. So,
I mean, Lucas himself has said that canon can be a crutch. So,
sure.
In his opinion, all that matters is,
True.
Do you enjoy the story? Is it a good story? And sometimes I think that fans want the interconnected story to work so well that if one thing contradicts another, it's terrible. It's the worst thing that ever happens.
The grain of sand in the microchip, right?
Right. And it's not. You know, you've got hundreds of storytellers telling stories in a galaxy far, far away. Actually, now we're in a second galaxy if you watch the Ahsoka show. So
yep, we got a couple galaxies.
And we've got things that span thousands of years. You mentioned you like reading Legends and canon. I enjoy reading Legends and canon. Some I like better in one, some I like better in the other.
Very true.
And I always get a kick out of how the authors of the canon novels loved reading Legends. And they'll put a little Legends reference here or there.
Because they can't help
their
it.
stories.
Yep.
It's awesome.
It is cool.
You know?
It is cool. Love it.
Ross, I completely agree with you. That's a very healthy way to look at it. It's just different interpretations of the story by different people who make the story. And in universe, it's different interpretations by the people who are there in the universe.
Which is fascinating too, and very much parallels our own history as humanity.
Everybody's an unreliable narrator.
Yep.
Thank you again for the email, Ross. Listener, if you have an unpopular opinion that you'd like to share with me, or if you disagree with something I've said on the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. Also, at swlegendslounge. And of course, send in your Star Wars questions, your favorite character groups, your Mount Rushmores. I love hearing from all of you. And Matt, I loved having you on the show again today. Thank you very much for joining me.
It's always a pleasure, man. One of these days we're going to do a 3-hour geek podcast together, but this was awesome. This was so fun.
If the listeners would like to contact you, or if they want to check out the Davos Fingers podcast with you and our buddy Scott, how can they do that?
Check us out. You'll find us on Twitter at Davos Fingers. You can also just look us up. Our podcasting platform is Podbean. So if you just look up the Davos Fingers podcast on Google, you'll find us. We're on most of the podcasting sites that you'd be listening to something. And you can reach me on Twitter as well at Thackalanche. So avalanche, but Thackalanche. THACK Alanche.
What do you guys got coming up soon for the show?
Well, we are at our core a podcast that covers A Song of Ice and Fire, the book series that inspired the TV show Game of Thrones. And out of our 155 now episodes, About 130 of them are dedicated to that book series. However, we've bled that book series dry waiting for a new one to come out. And so we've moved on and are covering the King Killer Chronicle, which is another fantasy series by an author named Patrick Rothfuss. We've read the first book. Now we're on to the second one. And we'll probably, so if you like that series, check us out. And we'll probably take a little pause coming up here as the new season of House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spinoff, is coming out. And we'll cover that episode by episode.
I am a little surprised how much Scott was against watching Game of Thrones that he is willing to watch House of the Dragons. I'm not saying he likes it, but he's at least willing to watch it.
He's willing to watch it. And keep this between you, I, and our listeners. He kind of likes it. I think he kind of likes it.
I'll ask him that on the next episode. He will deny. There's no way he says he'll like it.
I think he kind of likes it. No, we have fun talking about it at least. So that's what matters.
Awesome. Coming up on the next episode of this show, Scott will join me for another Han Solo story. It's Star Wars Scoundrels, written by Timothy Zahn. You can look for that episode coming out on August 23rd.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much for joining us today, listeners, on the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.